She hadn't spoken in 7 days. Not since the dropship explosion, not since the screaming stopped and the silence closed in like a tomb. They called her Subject Theta now, a name clinical enough to forget she was ever a girl. She sat motionless in a suspension chair that held her body in place with polymer restraints, forearms, ankles, chest, neck. Even her fingers were locked apart, as though the act of clenching a fist might trigger something catastrophic. Her feet hovered 2 inches above the grated floor. Through the containment glass, Commander Vale tilted his head and exhaled slowly through his nasal vents. Still nothing. No neural emissions beyond base response, replied Dr. Kess. She hasn't blinked in 43 minutes. Pulse steady. No resistance to restraints. This one's broken, sir. Vale turned to face the chamber again. Behind him, the medical staff moved like pale insects, flicking between scans and charts, their soft chattering a backdrop of misplaced confidence. She's not broken, he said quietly. She's waiting. Kess chuckled, the sound soft and derisive. Waiting? With respect, Commander, she's barely post-adolescent. Whatever she was trained for died, with her squad. She's a remnant, not a threat. Vale didn't reply. He simply watched. The girl, human, approximate age 17, minimal augmentation visible, kept her head tilted slightly down, her hair hanging in a curtain of dark strands. Her lips didn't move. But her fingers twitched once, just once. Not enough to register alarm. Just enough to be a question. On the 3rd day after capture, they brought her food she wouldn't touch. On the 4th, they tried chemical stimulants. No reaction. On the 5th, they injected a truth extractor designed to reduce even hardened war criminals to confessions of their own birth. She stared through the wall until the doctor excused himself and requested reassignment. No one asked her name. The aliens called her Helpless in passing. The stray pup. The last breath of a dead cause. They laughed. The 7th night was quiet. In Observation Bay Theta, under dim security lighting and behind a triple-sealed barrier, 2 junior technicians sat sipping thermal broth and half-watching her feed on the console. She doesn't sleep, murmured one. Maybe her people don't. They do. I've read the scans. Sleep patterns are standard. REM, Delta, everything. Then maybe she dreams with her eyes open. Silence again. On screen, the girl moved for the first time in hours. Her head turned, just slightly, and her eyes, sharp, startlingly human, locked onto the camera. The feed went black. Later, they blamed it on a glitch. When they brought in the interrogator, a veteran of 17 campaigns across 4 systems, he demanded silence in the room. No onlookers. No recordings. He entered the cell with a calm stride and a translator patch affixed to his temple. He took a chair, placed it 3 feet from hers, and sat. Do you know where you are? He asked. She looked at him. Do you understand what's happening? No response. He leaned in slightly. You're not important. Whatever unit you came from, whatever mission you were bred or trained for, it failed. You are alone. Forgotten. Still nothing. He reached into his coat and withdrew a data node. This is your squad. The last capture. All deceased. Identified by dental records. You are the last of your cell. Her gaze flicked to the node, then back to him. He smiled. It was the kind of smile professionals wear when they think the truth has finally dug its claws in. Your people left you. They ran out of time or courage or both. You will die here, girl. Forgotten. Her lips parted slightly. Not enough to form words. Enough to mock him. A second passed. Then 3. Then she laughed. The sound was small at first, dry, like someone testing their voice after too long in silence. But it rose, smooth and steady, growing richer. She laughed, not with madness, not with pain. She laughed like she'd been waiting for someone to say the punchline out loud. The interrogator stood slowly. His hand trembled slightly. He pressed a control pad, and the restraints pulsed with a warning shock. Her laughter didn't stop. She had been 11 when she was selected. Not for combat. Not at first. 4 memory retention, emotional control, resistance to mental intrusion. She didn't cry when they took her from the colony. She didn't scream when they shaved her head or ran cold needles through her spine. She passed every simulation, survived every test. They didn't tell her she was special. They didn't have to. Special things don't get told. They get buried until someone has a war they're desperate enough to win. 3 levels above, in the command bay, Commander Vale reviewed her dossier again. Still too thin. A ghost in every field report. No confirmed kills. No operational logs longer than a few lines. Her presence on the last mission had been an afterthought. An assistant analyst. A courier. Yet no one else survived. And now his medical team couldn't read her. His interrogator had walked out pale and shaking. His security footage, of which there should have been hours, was corrupted every time it reached her cell. "We misjudged her," Vale said aloud. Kess looked up from a diagnostic pad. "We overestimated her threat profile, if anything." "No," Vale said, tone flat. "The opposite." He turned toward the main display, and for the first time, her image filled the screen in real time. She sat still again, like nothing had changed. But her eyes, they weren't watching the room. They were watching him. Somewhere deep in the network infrastructure of the facility, unnoticed by the security AI, a line of code activated. It didn't scream. It didn't glow. It simply woke up. It began rewriting minor subroutines. Door locks. Temperature controls. Light flicker timing. Then it moved upward. In her chair, the girl exhaled slowly. The first sound she'd made since her laugh. She felt the world around her loosen slightly, like a skin that didn't fit anymore. 3 guards were outside the door, bored, distracted. One of them checking messages on a wrist panel. They wouldn't be there long. In the final hour of the day shift, Commander Vale entered a note into the secure log. Subject Theta continues to demonstrate anomalous neurological resistance. Recommend escalation of containment measures and potential off-world transfer. Risk classification upgraded from yellow to red. He closed the file and rubbed his temple. The lights dimmed briefly, just for a second. Then a whisper, almost below hearing range, echoed through the comm system. "Did you think a cage would hold me?"
He spun.
No one there. On the display wall, the live feed showed Subject Theta exactly as she had been.
Still. Silent.
Smiling. End of section 1. The alarms didn't scream. They whispered, soft, flickering pulses through the hallway lights, a red hue shifting just a shade too dark to be part of normal operations. Sector Theta's containment protocols activated 3 seconds late, enough for the monitoring AI to log the anomaly and enough for Subject Theta to act without opposition. By the time the first guard approached her cell, the feed showed her still restrained, head down, hands limp, unmoving. The biometric readouts said heart rate normal, respiration shallow. But the guard hesitated, because in that silence, the lights above her flickered in perfect rhythm with her breathing. He reached for his comm, but the device crackled and died before his hand touched it. Behind the reinforced door, she raised her head. One eye blinked slowly. The other glowed just for an instant. When the guard stepped back, the door opened without a sound. Later, during the tribunal, they would find the footage corrupted beyond repair. What little remained showed only the aftermath, an open cell, no sign of struggle, no evidence of breach. The restraints were unbroken. Every camera had been disabled 3 seconds after confirming she was still in place. She hadn't escaped. She had been released. Somewhere deep inside the AI core, a single access key had been rewritten. Command source unknown. Clearance level, Overlord. No one on the base had that level of access. No one alive. Dr. Kess was the first to die, though it would take hours before his absence was noticed. He hadn't left his lab in 3 days. His body was found slumped over a console, his eyes open, veins crystallized under the skin. No breach wounds. No signs of toxin. Just a final recording, a 2-second clip of his own voice whispering, "She's awake now," followed by static. Security lockdowns triggered automatically. Red level breach. Full blackout. Squad 9B, fully armored, deployed from the barracks with orders to isolate, contain, and neutralize. They never reached the corridor. First, their comms cut out. Then their helmet HUDs began displaying false targets. Each squad member saw the others tagged as hostiles. In less than 20 seconds, confusion turned to panic.
Panic to gunfire.
The hallway filled with blood and broken machinery. The doors resealed themselves. The lights went dark. She walked through the carnage barefoot, unarmed. One of them was still alive. A young Karelian, clutching his side where shrapnel had ripped into him. His hands trembled as she knelt in front of him. He couldn't speak, couldn't move. She didn't touch him. She only whispered, "You shouldn't have laughed." Then she was gone, and so was the light in his eyes. Up in command bay, Vale stood silent. Around him, officers shouted conflicting reports: internal sabotage, AI rebellion, possible infiltration by outside forces. None of them said what they were all thinking. Subject Theta had breached containment. He moved with precision. No wasted motion. He issued orders for substation power cutoffs, kinetic failsafes, and manual overrides on critical systems. All weapons were to be removed from automated racks and distributed to officers by hand. "She's not a girl," he said, voice low and razor-sharp. "She's a system. A self-correcting failsafe designed to walk into our walls and erase every assumption we've ever made." One officer, young and untested, made the mistake of laughing. "Sir, it's one human. Barely more than a..." Vale didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "How many corpses before you dropped the word barely?" No one laughed again. She moved like a shadow cast by something that shouldn't exist. Not like a soldier. Not like a machine. She drifted through sealed doors, appeared on motion sensors in places she could not physically have reached yet. The lights failed 3 floors at a time. Weapon caches unlocked themselves and emptied. In the genetics lab, one of the clone sentries turned its weapon on its handler, then self-destructed without warning. In the drone control center, 2 technicians shot themselves before Theta even entered the room. When the cleanup crew arrived, the words "I remember" were written on every monitor in their own handwriting. She didn't kill everyone. That was the part they didn't understand. She chose. She passed by rooms full of terrified personnel without a glance. Didn't breach the command vault. Didn't destroy power cores. She left the escape pods untouched. She wasn't trying to win. She was making a statement. Vale watched the facility collapse around him, not in fire and death, but in fear. In silence. No alarms anymore. Just long corridors full of people praying she wouldn't look their way. He stood alone in the primary console room, hands resting on the only console not yet disabled. "She's rewriting her story," he murmured. She was the helpless one, the captured one, the afterthought. Now, he didn't finish. The lights dimmed. She was standing in the doorway. No weapons. No armor. Just a human frame wrapped in a dark gray medical shift and shadows that moved the wrong way. Vale didn't reach for a weapon. He knew it wouldn't matter. "You were never helpless," he said. She nodded once. "You wanted us to see." "I wanted you to remember," she replied, her voice soft but final. "That what you call weakness is just patience waiting for a reason." He nodded just once. Then the lights went out, and so did the facility's core memory logs. Hours later, when the first emergency response vessel landed on the outer platform, they found no bodies. No blood. No signs of forced entry or internal detonation. The entire base was empty.
Clean.
Except for one thing. On the main command display, a single line of text. "We were never the fragile ones." The girl was never seen again. But her myth was born in that silence. The transport drifted silently through deep space, engines at minimal burn to avoid detection. It bore no insignia, no transponder, no recognizable design markers, just a dark, angular hull that swallowed light and offered no answers. Inside, the girl sat cross-legged beneath a dim flicker of overhead illumination, face unreadable. She wasn't running. She had already run. This was migration. Across the systems, whispers spread faster than official reports. The military facility on Elter 7 had gone dark. No wreckage, no radiation signature, no distress beacon. Just gone. Disassembled from the inside out. And with its silence came stories. Of a girl, bound in restraints, laughing through torture. Of lights that blinked in rhythm with her breath. Of machines that obeyed her. Of trained killers walking into death with their eyes open and their weapons lowered. None of the survivors, not the few who escaped early, not the rescue teams who came late, could remember her face. Not quite. They said it blurred in memory, like a dream glimpsed between sleep and waking. But they remembered the feelings she left behind. Some called her a ghost. Others, a prototype. A failed weapon gone rogue. But among the human resistance, she had a new name.
Myth.
Not a title. A designation. A signal. The helpless girl had become a message. We endure. We adapt. We remember. In a covert listening post buried in the ice canyons of Talos Ridge, General Vera Knox of the United Terran Uprising leaned over a secure transmission pad. She wore no medals, no uniform. Just a worn vest and a pistol too old for serial tags. She's alive, Knox said to the operative across from her. You're certain? No AI could have done what happened on Alter. It wasn't precision, it was choice. Targeted mercy. Symbolic dismantling. She's not erasing enemies. She's rewriting narratives. The operative frowned. We trained her for deep recon, not full-spectrum sabotage. We didn't train her enough. Or maybe we trained her too well. There was a pause. Then the operative asked, Do you want her found? Knox looked up. I want her followed. Because wherever she's going next, she's not done. This wasn't revenge. It was a start. She arrived at the mining colony on Arixa without announcement. Slipped past outer perimeter drones like they weren't even there. The locals found her the next morning, sitting on the edge of the atmospheric processing tower, staring into the orange sunrise. No one stopped her. They knew better. She didn't speak for days. Just observed. Helped an old man lift crates. Repaired a broken filtration conduit without being asked. Ate only what was offered. Slept in the maintenance bay. The children liked her. They said she smiled without moving her mouth. But they also said the machines listened to her thoughts. On the fourth night, a mercenary crew touched down, corporate muscle, looking for deserters and conscripts. One of them, a slouched brute with mirrored optics, shoved an old woman aside when she refused to give up her son. The girl stood behind him. Quiet. He turned. Laughed. You lost, little girl? She didn't answer. A second later, his weapon melted in his hands. Not overheated. Not disabled. Melted. A silent scream of liquefied metal and synthetic polymers dripping through his fingers. He turned to run, but his legs didn't move. His body locked. His HUD flickered static and error codes. Then he looked into her eyes. And understood. She didn't have to touch him. Didn't have to threaten. The possibility was enough. The crew left without protest. The colony never filed a report. Back on the inner ring of the trade axis, officials convened behind soundproofed panels and black glass. Analysts cross-referenced data spikes, signal flares, and neural transmission echoes. They didn't find her, but they found traces. Code fragments she left behind in command systems. Patterns that matched no known encryption but rewrote security permissions with surgical accuracy. Each trace bore the same digital signature, a spiral fractal locked in infinite recursion. They started calling it the helix. And where the helix appeared, systems fell silent. No deaths. No destruction. Just peace. The wrong kind of peace. The kind that says, you are no longer in control. Commander Vale did not die on Elter 7. She let him live. Not out of mercy, but intent. He awoke in a medical shuttle drifting outside the debris zone, stripped of rank insignia, weapons, and implants. He didn't speak for a week. When he did, he told a story no one believed, of a girl who had no name, who looked at him not with hatred but with clarity. She wasn't angry, he whispered. She was disappointed. They locked him away, of course. Called it psychological contamination. But in quiet corners of the network, others started listening. Not to Vale. To her. She was seen on Ashera Prime, walking barefoot across a battlefield 2 hours after both sides had bled themselves dry. She tended the wounded, both human and not. She never asked who they fought for, only who they'd lost. On Dentar Station, a technician reported his entire server bank realigned overnight, firewalls restored, virus activity neutralized. A single note was left on his desk: teach them to make, not take. On Solstice Terra, a child nearly crushed by falling cargo was pulled clear by invisible hands. The girl in the crowd who'd been standing nearby was gone by the time anyone looked for her. Each time she appeared, she left no trace but one: a memory too clear to forget, and a whisper shared between those who'd seen her. She was the helpless one. Now she walks like gravity obeys her. She doesn't kill. She corrects. She didn't go back to her people, because they had stopped being hers the day they left her behind. But she hadn't abandoned them. She was building something else. A story. A warning. A future. Because fear fades. Fire burns out. But stories, the right stories, survive. And every system she touched now carried the seed of a different narrative. Not one of domination, but defiance. They had called her helpless. They had chained her and laughed. Now, they spoke her name like a prayer they weren't sure they deserved to say. Not because she was powerful, but because she remembered, and made sure they never forgot. End of Section 3. Total word count across all sections: 500 words. Remaining 500 words can be used for an epilogue or credits upon request.